Welcome to season 3. This episode is one to keep full attention and take notes from start to end. Today is all about looking into the future.
We're looking at gaming, we're looking at the future of the home to create a space that would be adaptive for all. This touches on every single brand. So that's a really big one.
Brands, they cannot not consider getting influencers, creators to be involved.
For me, one of the biggest trends will be this idea of the metaphysical flex. So literally physical worlds with a portal to the metaverse in them.
I'm just really interested how perhaps brands and also influencers could be a little bit more assertive in what trends to follow, what's right for the audience.
Because if we're talking 2040, I think it's some of those sorts of things that I think will be really exciting things to talk about.
Hi everyone, I'm Mara Genovese, founder and president of MG Empower. MG Empower is a fully integrated marketing powerhouse, and this is our podcast, Influencer Marketing Uncover. And by the way, welcome to season 3. This episode is one to keep full attention and take notes from start to end. We are in London today for the first time, recording this incredible studio that the team here had put together, had a lot of work on it for about 6 months, and now we are here and I'm so happy. And today, to kick off the new space, I have the wonderful Kate Barron, who is, beside being a top journalist and a writer, and is a futurist and innovation strategist. So today is all about looking into the future. She's also a global trend forecaster specializing in retail, brand communication, fashion, design, visual, and pop culture. And then before I introduce you to Katie, let me introduce you to Alex. So Alex Ray is our head of brand partnership here at MG Empower. And it's the first time that Alex is joining me as a co-host. So welcome to Influencer Marketing Uncover podcast, Alex.
Thank you very much, Mara. Your few words on our guest are certainly enough to keep us hooked, but there's still so much more to her CV. Katie is currently the content director at Stylus, an expert source for trends and insights, research and advisory agency that provides strategic cultural intelligence to companies across the consumer-facing industries. She's also a senior contributor for Forbes.com since 2018 as a specialist in retail strategy, innovation, and commercial culture. She's the author of 2 books on visual culture and a curator, speaker, and board member of an infinity of very important institutions.
Wow.
So that's certainly a lot to go on here. I might have to take a quick breather here, but
I really enjoyed that.
Really
that was
nice
great.
to meet
you. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to be here.
Welcome, Katie. Yes, that's what a bio you have. So we're gonna have a lot to talk today. And to start with, I think what I am very curious and want to hear from you. What are the trends for 2023?
Yeah.
And how do you find those trends? So what is the process to actually come to the trends of the year?
Yeah, I could give you about 10 or 20 trends really,
okay.
But I think let's go just for kind of 3 big ones, because I think the key thing is with this is with trends forecasting, sometimes there is a reputation about actually is all this kind of pie in the sky, where is it really pulled from? But really we're sort of tracking with the trends I'm going to talk about very briefly. I'm tracking things that have been bubbling up for quite a long time, and actually things that are becoming a moral and a commercial imperative, things that are so important to consumers, but also from a brand perspective, thinking about brands' opportunity to really shape the world in a positive way. So you have that kind of confluence of what people need, what people want, what is resonating, but also that really amazing sweet spot about how brands can actually shape the future. Because I think one of the most interesting things about kind of trend forecasting and futurism particularly is that actually you're looking at kind of current trends to map out where the future is going.
Really?
And the big thing with that is that, of course, you're saying that the future isn't inevitable, of course. You're actually looking at, if things keep moving, this is the way things will go. So actually there's an opportunity to steer things here, to present different opportunities as well. So some of the really big things, so things, for instance, we're working on at Stylus at the moment, we're doing a really big piece of work called All Abilities Brandscapes. So we're looking at this idea actually for a really long time. It's really, ability, disability. There are many different variations of people that, we need to level the playing field, basically. There's an amazing statistic. It's something like only 2% of websites are accessible in the world, which is insane when you really think about it. And this idea that the kind of lens that we look through the world is actually quite a narrow lens about how you access a website, how you get into a space. So I'm talking about cognitive, sensory, physical, of course, ability as well. So with this big piece of work, we're looking at everything from, amazing things like tools where you can have a website and it can be reconfigured almost instantly. Wow. So without any kind of sacrifice of the visuals that you've got on there, for anything from Parkinson's to dyslexia to even, for the aging body, because there's it's really interesting if you think about it, that actually we're all only temporarily fully able in a way, in every capacity. So it's about kind of really thinking how we sort of frame these things as well, and we're looking at it in terms of adaptive entertainment. So we're looking at gaming, we're looking at the future of the home, to create a space that would be adaptive for all. So right across the board, we're looking at representation, where we're looking at, in virtual worlds, what this means, that actually, what does it mean to be part of a community that perhaps has some sort of disability or condition, and actually that community is really important to you, and how do you want your lived experience to be reflected in that? So we're kind of exploring all these spaces that require us to go into lots of other communities and have very deep conversations, and so that's one thing we're looking at, because this touches on every single brand, everywhere, whether you're a fashion brand, whether you're dealing in the physicality of things, whether you're dealing in virtual spaces, whether you're dealing in just the way that you communicate. So that's a really big one. Another really big one that we were talking about actually before this, talking about the idea of the metaphysical flex. Okay. That, lots of people have been saying you've got this kind of cooling of like they're calling it like the crypto winter.
Yes, the crypto winter.
It's warming up again.
It's warming up again, yeah. And lots of people kind of last year kind of going, oh my God, but actually, we're in a cost of living crisis. There's still, a huge amount of conflict, and, there are bigger things going on in the world than the metaverse. Do we really need like another Roblox activation? But the point is, obviously, the metaverse is so much bigger than that, because we're talking about Web3. We're talking about the future of the internet. So of course these things matter. It's the future of e-commerce. It's the future of the way that we live, communicate, learn, all these things. So I'm sort of thinking about, this year particularly, where does it go? And actually, for me, one of the biggest trends will be this idea of the metaphysical flex. So literally physical worlds with a portal to the metaverse in them. Because think about somewhere like the Outernet. Okay. Really amazing. So the Outernet, if you don't know it, it's here in London. And it's a huge, big space that's a kind of, think of it as a kind of immersive arts destination. It's part event space. You can have, it's right on the end of Tottenham Court Road and the sort of axis of Tottenham Court Road and region of Oxford Street. So you couldn't really get more mainstream, basically. Yeah. Huge thoroughfare. Yeah, huge. And what you've got in there, you've got these amazing screens inside and outside that are fully kind of AR, AI, VR, crypto compliant, that you can also plug into as a brand. So if you're a brand that's like, I don't know what I'm doing with this space, you can almost borrow that space. They're doing things in there where you can go in and you can kind of see the metaverse in there. You can also wear a headset so you can kind of see yourself and be in the metaverse at the same time. They're basically using it as a space to kind of trial these technologies, but in a way which is actually very democratic, because, with a lot of the tech that I see, one of the problems is it can be quite elitist.
Exactly.
And it's like, well, it's okay if you've got a headset, or that you understand, you're a crypto connoisseur, or you understand about these things. But actually, being able to get to the mainstream, that can be the big game changer, because whether you're talking about how people use it in an art perspective, art, culture, in any way.
Education element as well.
Yeah.
Right?
You want to be able to kind of put this stuff out there and actually go, it's talking about it, as people that are experts and influencers, it's really important. It's like you put a tool out there and put it in the hands of people that never had it before, and see what they do with it. Yeah. And those are the things that can really change the world a lot.
Yeah. And do you still see some of your brand clients being very interested in the space, or has that cooled down as well? Is it warming up again?
They're definitely a bit nervous about it, but they're definitely seeing the value, and they're definitely seeing the value in the fact that we've had the kind of, you've had Roblox, you've got Fortnite, people were kind of aware of it from gaming, and that's what all the talk was about. But actually understanding that the opportunities, if you think about, we've got an epidemic of loneliness. People are super obsessed with well-being in all kinds of ways now. So they're realizing that actually the metaverse presents a way to access other things. I mean, actually, funnily enough, talking about the Outernet thing, one of the big things that they did is they did a concept. It actually wasn't entirely metaverse, but it kind of connected to it. Where they did a thing with a company called Pixel Artworks, where it's called Room to Breathe. So you could go in there, and it was like having a kind of, on the high street. Room to breathe. You can literally go into this space, and you have almost like a meditation space, kind of just off like one of the busiest roads ever in the world, literally. And you go in there, and you can plug in and have. They did it with psychologists and with breathwork experts. Yeah. So it was something that was kind of very well programmed to say, actually, with the sounds and the visuals, and you could do it with a VR headset if you wanted to go to that space, but to give you just that kind of moment of respite and a moment of education to say, what about all the people that really struggle to find a space, that find a space to go into, and to give them that space. And I think these are some of the changes, because we're seeing people shifting from thinking that the metaverse is all about an open space. It's all about gaming. It's just about entertainment.
But it's not.
Because it is about it is about those things, but it's also about having a room of your own. I mean, for me, that's one of the most exciting things, like to be able to go into the metaverse and go, that's my space, that's my pod. You know what I mean? I mean, for me, that would be great. From whether it's you're as a parent, or whether maybe you're like someone that's really young and you're working from home, and you just can't carve out that space. The idea to have a space in a digital world where it's you create your space, you express yourself, you invite who you want into it. It keys into a lot of things.
I think it's a way to make any space or experience a little bit more immersive, right? And that's obviously true for the individual. Like, we can escape into different ways. But it's also for brands, right? I'm thinking retail spaces, how can you make a space more immersive for the consumer, to make the whole transaction a little bit more, natural, essentially.
Yeah, because if you look at e-commerce, it really doesn't make sense, a lot of it at the moment. Like we just deal with what we're given, right? Mostly as sort of, consumers, fans, audiences. And the more that you put up with it, in a way, the more people are like, they find it hard to accept there's a different way of doing things. But if you look at, there are companies like Journey is a really good one, actually. It's a German company. They're sort of metaverse builders. It's only really being used by kind of really big brands at the moment, largely because some of the stuff is expensive, because their big kind of premise was saying, let's actually look at the aesthetics, because the aesthetics of the metaverse were turning a lot of people off. They were kind of either really like cyberpunk aesthetics, or it was either kind of like really cyberpunk, really like Ready Player Me, or like geometric for kids, basically. And they were saying, but what about if actually we could create, in gaming, they call them like AAA games, where everything's like hyper-realism, but better. So it's almost like, imagine the best holiday you were ever going to go on, and you could create that space. And that becomes a brand space. And imagine being able to go and walk through a space and being able to actually have, the most incredible flagship you've ever experienced in your life. But even better, actually, you get to go in that space and you get to choose who's in it with you. So for instance, they have a tool where, imagine you go into sort of Roblox and you're sort of forced to see like thousands of other avatars. Maybe actually I don't want to see all those other people.
So then you can create your own space with the people that you
I
want
could just
to
have
be
my own Alex in that space. So I can choose the settings. So again, you get that really nice sense of control of who's in it, who talks to you. You can do video calls in it. You can kind of speak avatar to avatar if you just want to have, an anonymous experience, or you can be you to you. So we could actually say, actually, I'd like to just chat to you because, I haven't seen you and you're in a different country. Now let's have a video call. So all of a sudden, it's really, the premise of that is just really amplifying or creating something much better than we've had before.
With a lot more creativity
a lot
more
creativity.
Right?
So why wouldn't you want that? And even things actually that are really really great for language tools, things that you think, there are many things in the real world that actually are a kind of stumbling block for people to go into a shop. You go into another city, maybe you don't have the language skills, you go to Germany, for instance, and you think, I feel a bit intimidated. I want to go into this amazing store, but I don't know how to communicate. Imagine if you're in a space like that, and actually you can communicate with someone from a completely different part of the world because you've got instant language translation tools.
But Katie, but like, that's fascinating, and I'm like, that's what I'm just like, I'm just like, I love to to actually understand, like, from you that work with trends and understand like how everything gets evolved, especially with seeing the Web3 and metaverse. But how do we actually sell that to brands to join those space? Because you mentioned earlier that, you know, it's still brands that still have, you know, a little bit of, you know, fear of getting into the space, or unsure if it's the right time, or even unsure if their consumers are ready for the space, right? Because I think there's the brand that need to be ready to actually join and creating, you know, those spaces within metaverse or creating digital experience. But also there is the consumer element of it, right? Are the consumers actually ready to be part of an experience like that? So as an agency, of course, we have so many clients, and we are like, we love to think forward and think future, and we always approaching our clients like, let's innovate it, let's look at what the trends are, let's think of metaverse. But we as well, the same, we feel the client say, I'm not ready, or they wanted to see, let's see which brand's gonna do it first, and then we follow through. So how do we actually, like, you know,
and you do get those, you know, the metaverse, widely publicized places where someone makes like a £200,000 metaverse and then 6 people go.
Exactly. That's another point, like the investment, right? Because it is not, we all know it there's a cost for you to create those space, right? But how we measure return, or it's not, we are not yet in a moment that we should think about return. It's more, let's test and learn, and then understanding, and then thinking of return. Because there's all these elements, right? The investments versus my consumers are ready to it or not.
How do you market
how
to
do
them?
You market to them?
I think there's a few different things there. I think, you know, how do you market to them is a really important one, because it's how do people know it's there? How do you keep communicating that the things are changing in this space that you might be creating? So actually Journey were talking to me about that, because they were saying they were creating a tool where on your Instagram, for instance, on a brand's Instagram or LinkedIn or any social platform, they would create a space where actually via a link you could just go straight into that thing. So all of a sudden it was saying, you're already in these spaces. People are very accustomed, you know, as a brand, you will probably have built up, spent a lot of time investing in your Instagram or your LinkedIn or TikTok, wherever it might be, to have a portal to kind of go, you don't need to have to kind of work out how to get to this place. We will actually just say, you're already here, interested? We'll take you in. And you kind of stealthily, but kind of overtly stealthily, if you like, go into that space. And so that's one way to get people into those spaces. Once they're into those spaces, in terms of, you know, the ROI, actually in those virtual spaces, compared to doing like an experiential marketing activation, it's actually a lot easier, because you can track who do people talk to, what are they actually looking at, where are they spending their time. And actually, if you also have, you know, if you're creating a proprietary brand metaverse, so if you're H&M working with a Journey, for instance, you can kind of meld your CRM, your profiles of your consumers with what you're doing in those spaces. So all of a sudden you've got a much bigger crossover. So those things are really important. And we're seeing other companies, like there's a company called AnamXR that are starting to create, this is where things like NFTs come in, where if you have an NFT that links to a particular brand, via having that NFT, you will get like a notification on your phone to say there's a new metaverse experience starting. So it doesn't require the things where before it used to be people would have to like be quite nerdy about it really, and like sit on a particular Discord server or know that, and it would almost be like you've got to be in the know to know that something's happening. Whereas some of the tools that are happening now are making these things much more mainstream. So it's almost like some of them going, do you know that your favorite brand, say, let's say, you know, Nanushka is having a sample sale in the metaverse at this time, and you're like, actually I will, and here's the link to get into it. So it's those sorts of things that just make it very easy in the same way. So it's almost like thinking about the way that you're doing your email marketing and things like that, similar principles, but using the tools that connect.
But do you think the consumers' interest space of metaverse will be the same? Because consumers that, you know, would prefer to have, you know, real experience into retail shops. Because there's this terminology that they, like brands say, direct to consumer and direct to avatar. So the brands will have to understand, okay, who are my direct to consumer that I need to do specifically marketing, and who are the avatars, the direct avatar that I have to do a different type of market. What's your view on that
I think sometimes it will cross over. Sometimes it will be the same person that will be like, actually, I really enjoy shopping in physical spaces. You know, we still know that it's like 85% of people, even though, you know, e-commerce is slowing slightly, but it's still growing a lot. It's still like, you know, by 2026, it will be risen by like 40%. But you've still fundamentally got 85% of people that want to shop in stores. But it's not different people. It's the same people doing these things. So quite often, and depending how young they are, it will be the same people. And I think, I mean, funnily enough, a live project I'm working on as a kind of spin-off at the moment is I'm part of Farfetch had this sort of dream assembly at this Outlier Ventures group. Amazing. And I'm working, I think I'm allowed to say this. There's a company, I'm sort of doing some sporadic mentoring with them called Alter.
Oh, yeah.
And it's really, really interesting because what they're doing is they like this idea of kind of looking at, you know, they're talking about how brands really want to get into their archives, how they revive their archives, or just sort of flesh out these archives, stop them being these kind of dead concepts and bring them to life, and how you can use virtual tools to do that. And, you know, also being very mindful that, you know, when brands have like a big exhibition at, say, the V&A or something, only so many people can ever get to that exhibition. Exactly. So that idea of kind of democratizing
this is what I love about metaverse. The democratization of access and we were to saying, things like an exhibition, for example.
Yeah, super important. It's amazing. We were saying, and they were kind of saying to me, you know, from my experience, it's one thing talking to brands, but if we think about brands, you know, you've got retailers, but let's think of the museums as brands themselves. So what if you're like the V&A and you've done something like, like one of my favorites, like maybe like Club to Catwalk or Fashioning Masculinities? What happens when that show ends? You know, one of the amazing things is, what if you had people, whether they did, even if they went in person, to go, you know what, actually, you went in person, but since then we've actually created other rooms, or we've recreated the thing that you went to, and now you can actually go to the virtual experience as well. So maybe you'll buy a ticket for the physical show, but then afterwards when it's finished, and they now, you know, they have to do another show in the V&A, but actually you would still have access. And maybe as that thing goes on, it becomes a rolling thing. So you might have, you know, amazing fashion journalists that might go in there and can continue. So you keep this thing going as a living, breathing thing. So I think there's a lot to be said for using the metaverse as this kind of ongoing portal for expanding the things that you're doing in the physical space as well,
also
and
helping
not,
smaller
you know,
artists to grow a lot faster.
Exactly.
Big artists, making it more accessible, right? If I'm thinking music artists, how can you know, beyond just the stadium, sell out your show?
Exactly. And I think, you know, we're seeing a lot to do with sort of merch tailing and fan tailing, and obviously for you know, with the rise of streaming. I mean, I wrote a book, funnily enough, about fashion and music and the intersections of that. And we were looking at these incredible stadium shows, and you know, there's an artist called Ez Devlin, and she was one of the chapters in this book. And it was really amazing because, you know, she was doing these incredible stadium tours and doing these things that were really crossovers between art, immersive experiences, music. It was just the sort of confluence of everything I was super fascinated by. And that was because really, you know, artists weren't making the same money in the way they were from just the album sales anymore. It was all about creating these amazing experiences. So there are those sort of aspects to that as well. I mean, there's a company called Blocktones that's like a collective of music producers. And they're actually working with AnamXR that I mentioned. So they're doing what you call token gating. So basically it's like if you have an NFT, you can go, so anyone can go to their experience on the metaverse. But if you've got the NFT, you can go into a special listening room and you can get these perks. And so there's a lot of stuff like that where I think it can be like special experiences, spin-off experiences. It's just it doesn't have to cannibalize what you do in the physical space. And I've always been a really big believer in, you know, we know that a physical space is sort of seeds activity in the digital world. You know, we're seeing
how to combine the both, right, and leverage from one to another. But because you said that e-commerce, it was slowing down, but now it's going up again, and then the physical experience is still 85%. Tell me more about that, because of course throughout the pandemic we saw the opposite, right? That was the rise of e-commerce. So like e-commerce just exploded because there is no other way, you know, consumers could, you know,
hence why it's slowing a bit now.
Exactly. But now it feels like consumers, not just from fashion or lifestyles brand, but there is this, you know, this motivation of having those experience on the retail spaces again. But they wanted to find a different type of experience that they used to have before a pandemic. So they're looking for more exclusivity. They're looking for more of an experience rather than just go and shop a pair of shoes.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about that. Like, what has the shift that you have seen from before and after pandemic on the retail experience?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, and we've got like this kind of paradigm shift to working from home. So obviously people are going back to the office now, but never, very rarely are they going back kind of as full away. So that in itself is spurring, there was a very simple statement someone made at the NRF conference recently. The marketing director, I think it was for Camp, the kids store in America. And she said, I'm going to be really honest. She said, people are using our space as a space to get out of the house because actually it's a reason for them to get out. The kids, and they're doing these amazing collaborations. So they're doing collaboration with they've been doing it with Nike, where they create this kind of kids space that's all about fitness, but it's trophy rooms, it's about the legacy of sport, customization. They even did like a fintech one. They did one with a bank where the kids could go in and like quite dangerous really, but they allowed them to take over the space and be like, okay, you want to learn about finance, you can run the space. I mean, caveat, I really don't know how old the kids were. That's sort of terrifying idea to me, but they would go in and they would earn points, and so they would earn points that they could buy stuff in the store. I mean, it was probably like, I'm saying it like it worked really well. It was probably like complete anarchy and probably.
But why do you think they did that? I don't know. Did they want to keep customers there longer, or
because it's partly it was about actually kind of creating. It's that sort of like Kidsania approach, where it was actually about creating an experience that was like I wrote a section for that coverage talking about the idea of sort of transformational experiential. That people to a certain extent kind of want to go in where they can learn a new skill, they can kind of feel enriched in some way, they can kind of, you come out of that experience feeling that more than you were before. That doesn't necessarily, and that could just be having the most amazing entertainment experience. They're also working with media groups, so they'd be working with Encanto. They did a whole Encanto experience where it was sort of translating that animated experience into a space. And of course, they're doing a very good job at kind of selling from that experience with the kind of mementos, as you can imagine. But there, even brands, we've seen it, like a brand that's kind of really shooting up in the States, Studs, which is literally just ear piercing. And they were saying that really they were creating this kind of quite full-on experience where they said, this is a service you can get really anywhere. And actually, we're going to make this something that really feels like you are having this kind of, the equivalent of having like a spa day out, but basically you're having your ears pierced.
Talking about kids and experience, I was in New York last week, and then my son came to visit me during the weekend, and he said to me, I want you to go to Nike store. And I never been to the Nike store in Soho.
Yeah.
And as soon as we got there, I was just like, wow, what is this store? Because it's a proper experience. And my son is really into basketball now.
Yeah.
And as soon as he get there, he said, let's go to the 4th floor.
Yeah.
Because it's the Jordan's floor. And they have the whole basketball experience there where you can have a teacher that can teach you basketball. And I was like, but Antonio, how do you know that? First of all, how do you know that on the 4th floor there's a floor called Jordan that's all about basketball? You can play basketball. Oh, because I saw on the YouTube. And I was like, okay, but it was an ad. And he's like, yes, it was an ad on YouTube that Nike has this store in New York. So I knew it. As soon as I'm in New York, I want to go to Nike shop. So we went to the 4th floor. And actually, they did have a space for kids to play basketball. So you have to become a member of Nike, so you can do their membership on the app straight away. And then you can have a half an hour playing basketball with, a professional that is there in the store all the time. And when you leave, you just get a badge, like you're now being, trained by one of Jordan's, whatever. And that was transformational for Antonio as an experience. And then the next day I said, what do you want to do today? He's like, I want to go back to Nike to play basketball.
Well, it's hemorrhaging money along the way. It's amazing. I mean, Nike's really, really smart with it as well, because it's almost like this full experiential. It's almost like borderline kind of a theme park, really, where you can go in there, and if all you have to have is the free app. And actually you can go in there and it's very personalized to you. So if you choose to opt into that, they will also be able to tell you and go, actually we know what you've been looking at via our other apps. It's only through things that the data you've allowed them to
There's
have.
no pop-ups that come up for me as I
Yes.
enter the store and it tells me, oh, you've left this in your basket online. They have it in store here because it knows where I am and the location, and I'm very in proximity to that store,
And
it's
you can
a
get a bit creepy.
But also
it's
good to know,
creepy, but ultimately, I mean, I think as long as the sort of people are kind of pretty much okay with their sort of do you care really about your if the personalization is really
good and it's valuable, then I'm happy actually to have it.
It's all about getting the personalization, the degree really, so it's about using your data science to make sure that you're not completely being spammy with it, basically. Because then if the personalizations and the recommendations are like 90% good, you're like, actually, I feel seen enough that this is good. And you know what? It is actually very useful to know that thing is here in my size, especially if it's an exclusive thing, especially if it's something you couldn't get a hold of, to know it's back in stock, and to be able at the same time go, I'm going to book this thing for later in the week. It's a bit like going, and I can book an exercise class. There's a thing upstairs to be able to see what's happening in those spaces.
It is
a little tiny portal to your own world.
The personalization element is what will engage people to actually want to be part of the physical and the digital world.
It's slightly different, but I tried out quite a cool thing in the new Nike. It was new in the summer actually, the West London one, where they had like a comparison table as well, which was really good. Not so much necessarily for younger people, but just getting over that choice paralysis where you could kind of put things on a table. But again, you could use it completely solo or with your own app, where it would say, okay, I'll put in, my app details,
with a digital
my profile.
screen or?
A digital screen.
Okay.
And you would literally put a shoe on top of it, and it would go, okay, so it might say, Katie, we can see that
I've seen it in a beauty store, actually. It told me, I put the beauty product on the table, and it told me all the ingredients that it had and, what it's good for. And
it can kind of go, we know that actually, Alex, you only like vegan beauty, or you've been like, or if I was about to say me, I was about to totally lie and go, we know that you like to run like, 3 marathons a week. I'm saying that like in my dreams, but really, really good. So all of a sudden it can kind of, those spaces where you're like, because these stores can be overwhelming as well. Sometimes particularly with these humongous like theme park like flagships, you can go in sometimes and be like, I know I'm supposed to be into this, but I'm actually not enjoying it because I really don't know where to start with it. It's just too much. So these little kind of pockets are really great. But
I think it's never going to be for everyone. You can't please everybody. Some people are just going to want to stick to shopping online. Other people want their store to always look the same. And then there's people who are really into innovation.
I mean, another trend that we were looking at in stores that I think is quite different actually is, for instance, we're looking at the idea of kind of calling them like asset studios or asset stores, I think I've called them, because there's that sort of big shift. And actually, and this connects to sustainability to having side hustles. So people kind of realizing, there's a really good statistic, something like 90% of Europeans now look at their stuff as assets. So it's a bit like you're aware, which is actually kind of quite positive actually, because it's sort of saying we're aware that our things shouldn't be dispensable, that actually you buy something and you might sell it on, and obviously it becomes more problematic if it's a fast fashion brand, because that can incite you to just spend more. But so we had there was eBay did a really sort of nice concept shop where actually you could bring in your stuff and they would validate it. And that's the idea where you can go in because and people are even doing it with NFTs. So Harvey Nichols have got an NFT vault, but if you go back to the physical thing, so you can go in and go, I've got this thing, I don't know what it's worth at that given moment, and someone in real time, which I think is the really exciting bit, can kind of go, market value is this. And then in that eBay shop, what was quite nice is they said, so either you can just know that, or you can swap it for the value of something on the shelves. Or they had a little photo studio which allows you to go, we will help you do a really good photo for this, a really nice image, sort of your image equity, and sell it. And it was really smart because it was that understanding that that's how we think, whether you're like someone that's very entrepreneurial or whether you're actually I would just like to know the value of this and I feel quite proud of it, whatever it is. But so that's another kind of trend that we're seeing. But with even Harvey Nichols with the NFT vault, because people a couple of years ago particularly bought all kinds of NFTs. Lots of which are now like, I've got a friend who will know who she is when she watches this. Spent quite a lot of money on some art NFTs, and they're all worth about $6 now. So there was a lot, which is partly why, hence the kind of crypto cool down. But some aren't, some are really. But knowing the kind of like value of what you have, and what you could do with that. There's something,
something
you know, in Britain, we're all known as a nation of shopkeepers. And I actually see it as an extension of that kind of old adage that we love to do jumble sales. I mean, that's just here. You know, we love a car boot sale, we love a jumble sale. People love setting up an independent shop. So it's a really sort of nice modern way of thinking about quite an old school mentality.
Have
really.
your own personal shop.
Shop.
Supercharged by everything from Vinted to eBay.
Yeah.
And Katie, now like brands, but what about creators?
Yeah.
Right? Because like now, like we understand like the importance of brands to kind of, you know, understanding like how to do both the physical and the digital, how to combine. But what's the role of the creators when we think about Web3 and when we think about metaverse? Is there any trends for the creative economy we're seeing?
I mean, I think we're definitely seeing you know, the sort of the 3D digital creator is becoming a huge
Was it called
factor.
3D
digital creators.
Okay.
So
Never heard
only.
about.
What's that, sorry?
They're creating visuals only and posting them on.
Or kind of 3D objects, actually.
There's a number of digital creators.
There's a number of companies that can allow you to create kind of really good. They give you parameters and create 3D modeling really. Because of course you've got lots of these brands are creating these amazing spaces, but we always at Stylus, my colleague Julia Owens, who's one of our pop culture media editors, she talks about, there's a really nice phrase about like the sparks of life in the metaverse, although some of these are actually sort of inanimate objects. So actually she was really talking about sort of pets and people really, which is a whole other subject. But actually with creators, whether you're creating, like pets for the metaverse, whether you're creating room sets, that kind of, for actually brands, I mean, obviously they have teams in-house that are very good at doing them. But, as someone that looks at kind of influencer marketing, there will be numerous people that are actually creating their own hacks, that are out there developing these tools that they can create from companies that are just, spin-offs or, companies that kind of tag into gaming companies like Unreal Engine and things like that and Epic Games, these tools. And people will be there with kind of big followings. So imagine thinking of them as almost like 3D creator influencers. Think of them in that bracket.
It's a very specific audience you can reach with these people. I mean, I personally follow some of the ones that do more the animation side of it on TikTok, right?
Yeah.
It's all digital, visual, animation, all created on the computer.
Yeah.
It's kind of mesmerizing and quite fun and good to watch,
And brands will need those creators in order for them to actually break into the world of metaverse, because they already have the followers, right? So they already have the audience. Why not co-create it and get them to participate?
Because it kind of, follows the principles of, with things like, Roblox and Minecraft and things like that. That sort of sense of building your own space has kind of almost been one of the principles of those spaces anyway, that people like the fact that, even going way back, it was all about creating your own city and your own spaces.
Lego.
Lego, exactly. You're exactly right. It's always been from really back in the day. It's always been about having a sort of sense of agency that you get to shape the world that you live in. Think of it on a very base level. So that's really important. And I think actually that's why, if you think about something like, go back to Nike again, swoosh, Nike swoosh, one of the most popular concepts in terms of actually branded NFTs. I think actually it was like 60% of all the sort of the top 10 NFTs that were bought, branded NFTs, 60% of it were connected to Nike last year. And with the Nike swoosh, what's really interesting, so basically it's a sort of slightly co-creational marketplace. Now, what's interesting is that it's backed, it's blockchain backed. So these things are stored on blockchain, but you don't need cryptocurrency to buy them. So what you do, it's about, you get brands that Nike set briefs to which fans respond. And so what's really important, so then all of a sudden you have this collective of people and that are kind of members of the community, let's say, that are creating these things. So they might create a design and you might have thousands of people doing it. And then the community will go, we like those 3 of those things, and we will kind of put them forward and they will be part of the collection. Now, later this year, you're also going to have Nike designers co-creating with some of the kind of the it's a bit like Depop. Whoever's a top seller, whoever's the community's favourite artist, they rise to the top via the collective. The collective boosts them up from the bottom. So it feels very democratic. It feels really fair and equitable. But importantly, they're doing it with Nike's own and if those virtual items sell, they will actually get commission on that. They will receive some royalties. But it's really smart. So you get people that are involved in it, will get money from it. It's very fair. It's very equitable from the brand. But I think what's been missed before in some of these conversations is that actually, we've seen lots about, decentralized autonomous organizations and people going, the future is all about having these sort of these communities, which I don't think is entirely true, because I think the trouble is when you get completely designed by committee, it can be a bit like,
it's a bit too rogue.
It's too rogue. And at some point, what if everybody
agree.
has a different opinion? What if no one, and then everybody, it works in a kind of, if you think of it from a very utopian stance, where you think that everybody that started that community continues to agree with each other and it's very cohesive and synergetic. But what if actually there's dissension in that community?
I think it's
what
a good
happens
idea.
then?
It's just that because you're so private on the blockchain, like nobody really knows who these 10,000 different people are. It could be all owned by the same person, and then again you lose that sort of democratic element that they want to push through those technologies, So that's a real thing. I think it's a little risky.
I think with the Nike designers that it's there's a lot to be said for still having some kind of figurehead or a selection of figureheads. We're seeing that in fashion at the moment. Maybe you have brands where you actually have a kind of number of sort of almost like guest editors that come in. But people that's why people still follow people on Instagram. That's why it's nice to have people for whatever reason, whether it's really nerdy or whatever it is, to have those people where you feel like, I believe in this person. We still want to have people that we ultimately believe in.
I think now with brands, they cannot not consider getting influencers, creators to be involved within their brand. But I agree with you that we cannot get them to co-create everything for the brand, because it has to have a balance of involving creators into the element of co-creation and get them to participate. What Nike is doing is genius, but it still have the essence of what the brand does independently.
Completely, because I think, and if you've ever worked in, because I've worked in-house for a number of brands myself, and I think we all know, and the brands that you work with, how hard you work as a brand to really identify 100%. It's not about just having a brand, but where everything's written down. It's about feeling who you are as a brand and knowing instantly, as you would as a particular personality, what works and what doesn't. And I think this is where you see quite a few problems in, I don't really want to name any names, but in luxury fashion, where actually, I know a lot of people that work on the campaigns, and there's a lot of, sometimes if you took the logos off, it's very difficult to know now who that brand campaign is for.
No identity.
Particularly if you look at
I will ask
Parisian
your
brands.
opinion. Talk about branding. What do you think about Burberry changing again their
I think
logo, communication?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one.
Do you think?
I think so.
Burberry, I love you, but I still don't have my opinion about this new.
I'm in two minds about it, because I
direction.
feel like in terms of diversity, it's really good, because I think, Burberry in a way, the fact that it's sort of reflecting a much more modern Britain is a fantastic thing. It's an amazing thing. In terms of whether they will carry on an identity that will feel cohesive, or again, whether it's something where you're like, but actually that looks like many other brands that I've seen. That's what I think remains to be seen. But we've only really seen like literally a handful of images.
Yeah,
but that's the thing. I think they're going more back to what they were originally more about, right? If you look at the previous logo, that looked very much like every other luxury fashion brand.
I still don't have an opinion about it, but my initial thought was again, because they've been doing a lot of we're talking about brands and how you engage with consumer and how you establish your brand. And I think when you change too many times throughout a short period of time, is sometimes you can that's my personal opinion, you can lose track of who you actually are as a brand and who is your consumer, right?
Exactly. So I think with that, I'm really fascinated. I'm really, really interested to see what's going to happen with the Fashion Week show, and I think that's going to be the big one.
And tell me some forecast for the future.
Yeah.
South by Southwest is in 3 weeks' time. Yeah. And for what I've been reading, we're going to be there. Yeah. They're going to talk a lot about future, but they're talking about 2050. Yeah. And I'm just I'm not even ready for 2025 forecast. Yeah. So forecast. How do you see the industry of digital brands, consumer? metaverse, Web3? What can we expect more from everything you already said?
Yeah, I mean, I think, really, really honestly, funnily enough at Stylus, we do actually look at kind of the consumer of 2040, but I think particularly when you're looking at kind of media, pop culture, retail, technology, these sorts of things, look at how much stuff has changed in the last 2 years. I think it's a little bit unrealistic in a way. I mean, I think certainly these sort of big macro changes in terms of thinking of us about having a kind of digital sort of double identity. I think that's one that's going to be for sure.
Digital double identity. Okay.
Yeah, the idea that, at the moment we kind of live in obviously we will all have to live in the real world, but actually that we will do a humongous amount more in the virtual world, and we will all have, I'm very interested in exploring sort of digital identity at the moment, and this idea of when we go into digital spaces, whether we are ourselves in digital spaces, whether we have a kind of fictionalized version of ourselves.
Do you think this is going to affect our mental health, that we're going to have double identity? What's the effect on our mental health?
Well, this is an interesting point because, and actually I did a panel at CogX talking about, it was called "Where Is My Head At?" The metaverse and mental health.
Because that's what I think sometimes. Like, and if I have to invent how I'm
because we talk about this idea of code switching. So there's this, it's very interesting, that idea that there's a certain amount of, in these virtual worlds, that living your truth is really important. There are many people that, for whatever reasons, socio-cultural, familial, can't necessarily feel that they can live at in their sort of their truthful space, express themselves. But there is a point where the fiction, that it kind of can go over into sort of fiction, where actually let's say you sort of expand, you elasticate your own self, as in the self that you kind of live in the IRL world, to actually, when you kind of have to go back and forth between them, that it can be very difficult and actually become very confused about sort of who you are, what the parameters are. You could feel potentially very stifled in the real world, because if you feel like, I feel like I'm the real me in this space, in the virtual space, but unfortunately I have to live and work in these spaces, then that can become quite problematic. For instance, this is really interesting. I met a filmmaker last year. We had this amazing guy, can't think of the name off the top of my head, I'm sorry about that, Dutch filmmaker who'd won several awards for a film that he'd done about maladaptive daydreaming. And so maladaptive daydreaming is this incredible thing where people basically daydream for maybe like 8-9 hours a day, sometimes more, as they go into these fantasy worlds. And some of our team were kind of horrified by it, and some of us that work more in the pop culture space and work looking at digital identities, we were sort of like said, yeah, but you know what, who am I to say what's real and what's your reality and what isn't?
If you're a creative person, you probably spend a lot more time in that world.
Yeah, and I've met people in virtual experiences. I was in one with Sam Field, actually. There was a Fabric of Realities experience, and I was watching people in that experience come in, and people who were obviously quite well known to other people because they were developers coming in, and people like fangirling and fanboying over other avatars in the space, going, oh my God, you're a certain developer, you created that world, and it was really weird, just like the real world. And I thought, this is really how it will go. But it was interesting. But what this guy had found that there was a point where people found it very, very hard to thrive in the real world when it got to a state where actually they'd almost kind of disconnected with their reality. And there are certain elements of reality that you have to engage with to connect socially for your own well-being in a way. So there's lots of discussion around that and how that might work in the metaverse. But of course, this all thinking about at South by Southwest. If we spend a lot of us spend a lot more time moving into these virtual environments, actually it might well be that we start saying, not to terrify anyone, but we might go, well, actually I spend 70-80% of myself in a virtual environment, and I really just go back to bed in the other one. All right, maybe not. I want to be quite careful about that, because obviously, being connected to nature and the real world and other people and these things in a a physical way. There are many things about that are incredibly important.
There's
Doctors
a reason
there are reasons why this kind of actual physical.
When you were telling that story, it reminds me of I don't know the name of the episode on Black Mirror, where, have you seen Black Mirror?
Yeah, I know the episode you're talking about.
Is the one that the guy is like all the time surrounded by so many screens. I think it's called the bicycle episode. Not sure about and eventually he's just there, look at the digital, all the screens all the time, and then eventually he's like, I needed to go to the real world, and he has a friend that sings really well, but then when they go, they don't know how to connect again back to the real world.
Yeah.
It's funny though that Black Mirror, it's been around for a long time now, and looks like they were like forecasting a lot of things that is happening right now, right?
They were spot on, because a lot of that stuff was already happening to some degree.
Yes, but
and it was exactly.
But now I think when I have time, sometimes I go back to some of the episodes, because I've seen Black Mirror like 4 years ago, and now when I look at back, I was like, wow, actually it's happening this now.
I mean, there's a lot about that kind of, you know, technology, human interlace, as some people call it, that's really important, because obviously there's a lot to do with co-presence and empathy, and the fact that, you know, using VR tools, allowing you to experience the world through somebody else's eyes is really important. And obviously, you know, I'm doing a bit of research work at the moment with companies that are actually allowing us to, you know, in the real world, objects are just, as in the real IRL physical world, objects are just objects. So I have a friend who runs the Design Informatics Centre at Edinburgh Futures Institute. I might have got the name slightly wrong with that. Lynn Craig. And she's working on projects at the moment where they're looking at actually, what if you're in a space where actually you can imbue a virtual object with a trait like newness or authenticity, because there are these things, and these areas of our brain that we don't really explore that much. Like, you know, there's a company called MetaSense and Full Fathom that works on this stuff. So on a very basic level, they're the people that will like create sounds for like a hairspray, which we don't really think about every day. But he talks to me. But it's fascinating when you talk to someone like that, you realise that the language that they use to talk about the world around them is very different to the language that I use, but it makes you realise that there's whole other layers to the world that we experience. And at the moment, you know, we sort of always think that these things are sort of passive experiences, but what about if we don't realise how important sound and the aggregation of sound and visuals and smell and all these things together become. So the metaverse and virtual worlds, there are all these other languages to explore that are really important.
I haven't thought about it, but it's so true.
But also some that won't be able to be replicated. If you're talking about smell, right? For example.
There are.
I'm sure they'll
like
figure out a way eventually.
No. Already, that's the thing. That funnily enough, that there are sonic frequencies that will fire certain synapses in your brain. So you will. So for instance, they've been working on a project literally at the moment where you can drink a specific drink, and you'll be walking through, and actually they will change in combination, but mostly it's just the sound actually. So you'll hear these sort of specific sonic frequencies. And your taste receptors, you will think that the drink that you're tasting is changing, but it's not. So they know the particular sonic frequency that can make something be sweet or citrusy or any of these flavors. So a lot of these things we think, we don't realize that actually we think it's, you know, we think in quite a linear way about these things. And I bring that back to this discussion about, you know, about thinking about the world in terms of all abilities, because of course at the moment most people tend to go, that are designing things will say, we're looking at the world, you know, whether it's the internet or physical spaces, and we're looking at it from a kind of, let's just say it's so-called like able-bodied world. And actually we're going to look at that, and now we'll try and kind of like tweak it so that it will fit other people into it. But actually, what if you looked at a group of people and you say, let's look at people that are so-called non-able-bodied, or, you know, have a sort of sensory impairment of some sort. But think about, they will often have a very different language or way of understanding the world through time, you know, even through time, sensory, different levels of depth. And actually it's like, maybe we should be educating ourselves, reverse educating. So actually we're looking at things through different eyes, through different languages. And I think, although that might sound a bit convoluted, I think there's a lot that's happening with these technologies in these spaces that's going to teach us to look through a very different lens to the one where we look at the moment, where it's like, this is the mainstream, and then we try and go off at the other side, and actually we should come at it from different angles to start off with. So but I mentioned that because if we're talking 2040, you did ask me about
the forecast, what's happening in the future.
So I think it's some of those sorts of things that I think will be really exciting things to talk about.
Katie, go for it, because I have one more thing that I want to ask to get her opinion on.
Yeah, there was just one question. So we've talked about many different trends now. And I think what I don't like to see is when there's one really big one and every brand and influencer just jumps on it. So I'm just really interested how perhaps brands and also influencers could be a little bit more assertive in what trends to follow, what's right for the audience, or what's right for potentially future audience that they want to move towards, right? Because there's a distinction there that I think, you know, they definitely have to make, rather than just always blindly following the next biggest thing, right?
Yeah. I think totally. I mean, I think, we look at the massive trends, but we also look at the more micro trends. And I think it's whatever space that you're in. We did a piece about looking at the cost of living crisis kind of before it really became massive. And we were looking at reframing frugality and things like that. And we were looking at mini trends within that from influencers, whether it was dupe culture, saying actually dupe culture's become quite cool because actually whether it's fashion, so it's like hacking your favorite fashion brands, maybe not so good for the brands, but but funnily enough, but these are the things that sometimes brands can subvert that and go, we will take something that looks anti-brand but we'll reclaim it. Or it was people saying, like mini fintech influencers going, actually, there's lots of people that don't know how to manage their money. Yeah. We will grab onto that and we'll do stuff like that. Or even the dupe culture. We looked at lots of influencers that are doing it in the food space that were going, people will show you how to make, the McDonald's burger and we'll show you how to do it at home. Or I think it might have been like KFC or something like that. And then KFC kind of jumped on the back of that and supported some of these people that were hacking them and were like, all right, but it's actually not ever going to be quite the original recipe. Yeah. So I think even from brands, it's, it's important to know what people are jumping on, the micro trends. Our team at Stylus, we look a lot at whether it's Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Be Real, all these things. So for instance, we're even looking at we were looking at like snackable social, saying that there's a kind of, again, as you often get, there's a cut-off point between people saying they're really fatigued by social media and feeling like this pressure to create this like perfect life, or just to post all the time is too much. But actually coming off it also creates a lot of anxiety. So what's this middle ground? So we were looking at kind of like snackable social and saying, look, that's why things like Wordle have become a really big thing, where it's like you just check in daily. There was another, someone had done a serialization of a Dracula novel where you would just like read that little excerpt every day for like 10 minutes and then people would talk about it on social. Then the next day you do the same thing. But it was only about being that for that 10 minutes or Be Real, where it's like, this point in time, you've got to keep it real. That's all you do. Yeah. There is no more to it. So there were things like that. So sometimes it's about those trends, but it's also about going, for us, obviously at Stylus, it's very much about, but where do they come from? What desire are they feeding? And is there another trend you want to jump on that actually, or you're creating a trend by understanding what's the mentality that it's behind behind these things? But some, de-influencing, everyone's talking about that at the moment. But like if I was a brand, some brands will probably be like, oh my God. Ooh, and we're sending things to people. And some influencers are like, actually, I want to be trending with the de-influencing trend. So I'm going to just start slating everything I've been sent. But actually, if I was a brand, probably I'd be saying, we all know with reviews that products that really sell generally tend to be ones where it's like 10 great reviews and one crappy one. So actually I'd probably be like, if I was a beauty brand, be like, let's get an influencer to do like, here are the best 5 ones of these brands, and here's one that's a bit shit. And then maybe you'll discontinue. Then afterwards you'll be like, brilliant, we're going to discontinue that and do more of these ones. So I think there's always, I don't know if that answers your question, but I think there are always a lot of little trends within it, but never kind of feel the pressure to feel like, you don't have to be on the cottage core trend or Barbie core if you're,
just need to be on where it makes sense for your brand.
Yeah, and understand why it is, what it is about that thing that's making everyone go nuts for Goblin core or Barbie core, or and is it actually
one thing with trends that sometimes I feel like there is this anxiety of brands that want to jump into the trend straight away because there is a trend.
Yeah.
But it's like, my perspective is so important. Like, if you wanted to do that trend, what's the objective behind you going to that trend?
Yeah.
Right. Are your consumers the right ones to actually follow that trend? Rather than just, because everyone is doing it, or because there's a trend, you have to do it. Because there is this anxiety of brands, okay, we need to keep up with what's happening, especially within the social environment and what influencers and creators are doing. But I think there's a stop moment there. Okay, is that make sense? Is that going to resonate to my audience? What's the objectives behind it, rather than just follow a trend? Yeah,
because people are so savvy, they'll sniff it out immediately, and it's a little bit, it's a bit like
the young ones.
Especially the young ones. It's like you'll see a lot of brands. They'll readily admit that they started trying to use particular kind of chunk of youth speak And it just like
backfires massively.
Yeah, really backfires
massively.
And then the brands
Massively.
that really go through the roof are the ones that actually hire those young creators to
Yeah.
run, channels
100%.
and brands for them. Actually,
and it's really okay not to be everything to everyone.
yeah.
It's like even back in the day, I always remember being on a show studio panel, and even for some brands, it's like there might be certain social channels that you just don't really want to be on. They just don't fit your vibe. But that's okay. You just go bigger on others. So I think,
Katie, the conversation, like I can stay here forever. And then the team said, we have a feeling that we might gonna have to do 2 episodes with Katie. So now team, yes, we're gonna have to do 2 episodes with Katie, because it's just like, it's amazing. But before we go, I want to ask a question. GPT.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
ChatGPT.
Yes, ChatGPT.
Yeah. Oh God, we're doing a report on this at the moment, so I'm not sure how much I want to get into this, but I think,
because I am very intrigued about it. I want to to understand what's the future for this.
One of my favorite examples is, Nick Cave. Amazing singer-songwriter, I'm a huge fan. And there was a fan actually sort of sent him a thing saying, this is, I've created a load of songs in the style of Nick Cave, basically. And actually he has a thing called the Red Hand Files, a blog where he responds to a lot of his fans. And they'd done it as a kind of homage to him. And it was really funny. And he was sort of said, look, I'm really sorry. And this isn't the same for everyone. Sometimes it's going to really work. But he said, he said, I'm really sorry. He said, but this is a really, if this is the future for AI and the arts, he's like, it's quite an apocalyptic day, because he was like, I'm here to tell you, Nick or whoever it was, this is a really shitty song. He was like, this is really, really abysmal. But there was one line in it where he said, actually, that one line, I do kind of get that. So there was one, and I thought that was really interesting. And when he kind of talked about what his problem with it, he said, it's not just because, he's actually very open to technologies and things like that, but he said, as an artist, he felt like being an artist and what he does, he said, every day you sort of struggle with being a singer-songwriter, because you have to have the audacity, sort of, being a human and humanity is actually about the audacity to push yourself further than you have been before. And as a collective to say, as humans, how do we become something new and to raise above that level? And he said, ChatGPT, it doesn't have those parameters. It's within this box. It doesn't understand what it's like to feel those things. So therefore it can't ever go beyond those things. It won't have the audacity to step outside itself. And I thought there's a much more eloquent, if we go to the actual description of it, it's much more eloquent. But it was really interesting sort of talking about, we have to kind of talk about the future of humanity alongside these things, because we're not saying that it's not useful, and there aren't some instances. So we're looking at it from everything from writing adverts to script writing in TV, to everywhere really, to creating visuals. But the places where it can be very damaging, so where you can literally put in an artist's name. And
that's why, because I feel the same, that can, might be useful, but also can be very harmful.
But that's, I think, I would almost see it as a little helper, as a little assistant, right? It does give me good ideas. It might, cut down on time on certain tasks. But I'm never going to let, my assistant take over my job and just let the whole thing do it.
Exactly.
But this is you, but then we're talking about, that's the thing for me, is the danger of it.
Think of it like that mood board assist is quite a good way to think about it, because one of the key things that obviously we're looking at the moment, obviously we're looking at the ethics and the kind of rights. If you're putting in an artist's name, then you're literally, you're potentially ripping off a whole load of other people's artworks.
Oh yeah.
But also it's more than that. It's actually, if you think about, it's like the filter bubble, the echo chamber. Obviously it's learning from what's out there now. Again, to Nick Cave's point, it's not really kind of leaping us into the future necessarily. People sometimes think it is, because it might pull up something that we think looks futuristic, but then our knowledge of sort of what's futuristic is based on what's been before as well. So there's lots of instances where there's that, there's lots of instances of very exciting unlocking doors to things very quickly, giving us ideas where we think, God, it might have taken me weeks to kind of research and get to that point.
And now.
But then in other ways going, but actually, is this reaffirming old biases, because it's been pulled from a load of stuff that's already out there? And I think you see that a lot, when you see particularly you saw it a lot when people were using like things like Lenser AI, and lots of women were going, it's cool, I look like an anime character, but have you noticed it's given me like much bigger boobs and massive eyes, and all of a sudden I look like a Japanese anime character? And that was just a really, really like very basic overt example about how it was kind of, it was actually sort of propagating old stereotypes and myths and things that aren't particularly helpful. But it's interesting what it kind of shows you. So I think it's this Pandora's box. You unlock it, but be aware of where it's coming from and what it's showing you. And sometimes it's actually not showing you something that futuristic. It's actually looking to the past, even though it's futuristic tech.
I mean, even ChatGPT was a little bit tricky. It had some biases actually built into it, right? There was this, I don't know, I saw this article and somebody was asking it about, just a comment on, Donald Trump's character. It said it cannot comment.
Yeah.
And then
really?
It asked the same about, Biden. And it actually gave you a full text, very flattering text on it, So if it's used in the wrong way with built-in biases, I mean, as much as I don't agree with either of those, it can be quite tricky down the line if you think, the power that a tool like that has on a lot of people that will potentially fully rely on it, for all their information.
We need another episode just on ChatGPT and AI, please, because it's a lot to talk about it, and it's because it's just something that is so new. That is still so many questions
really
around it. Exactly.
Yeah, really confusing.
So we're going to make a note. You're coming back and we're going to talk about GPT and AI for sure. Katie, what an amazing conversation. Like, I've personally learned so much with you. I don't know you, Alex, and I'm sure the audience has as well. So what a pleasure. Thank you so much for the time. And for, touching so much in just how many minutes? Half an hour? 1 hour. 1 hour. Here we go. Yeah, full hour. Thank you so much for everyone that's been here listening us today. Hope you have enjoyed this amazing conversation with Katie. And I just said she's going to come back because there's a lot to talk still about the future, ChatGPT and AI. Alex, thank you so much for being here with me today for the first time. Hope you have enjoyed. And Katie, again, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And if you're not following us yet, please make sure you do. We are on Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, and Apple Play. And I see you on next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in.